All right, so I'm going to introduce Vince Salvino. He's a Django developer who works right here in Cleveland, and he's going to be talking about Wagtail. Let's give him a round of applause.
Okay, thanks everyone. So Wagtail is a content management system that it's in the Django community. It's really like everyone kind of knows about it. In the general Python community, not as many people know about it. So I would love to show you about it today. Just a quick shameless plug here. My name is Vince Salvino. I've got about 10, 12 years of Django experience. CodeRed is the company in Cleveland. We're kind of like a small startup type of tech company. We do Django and Wagtail development, and we are actually building a Django deployment platform called CodeRed.cloud. So feel free to check that out and support us if you're currently managing a Django site. So, all right, before we talk about Wagtail, let's just talk about what is a content management system. So basically, it's a tool for building websites. It has a user-friendly interface for adding text, images, content like that to your website. Usually this is something that a non-technical person can do. And then on the more technical side, it is generating HTML out of that content that somebody entered. So pretty much every website everywhere is built with a content management system these days. The big ones that you've probably heard of is WordPress, or if you ever get ads on YouTube, Squarespace. But there's some other ones, Drupal, Joomla, Sitecore, Umbraco. I'll throw Plone out there because Plone is kind of an old school Python one from back in the day, but there's still a lot of people using it. So these are some examples of content management systems. Now Wagtail, what is Wagtail? Well, since this is a technical conference, the easiest answer is Wagtail is essentially Django on steroids. If you know what Django is and you've ever used it, just think of like a really beefed up Django. But more specifically, Wagtail at this point is arguably the leading open source Python CMS. If you go by GitHub metrics, we've got tons of stars, tons of contributors, tons of people following the project. If you go by users, we've got a lot more users than we even know are using Wagtail. You know, every day we're finding out that new like major big companies or big governments are using Wagtail, and we just, you know, as part of the core team, we have no idea. And best of all, it's open source. It's free. There's no commercial aspect to it whatsoever. You pip install Wagtail, and there's lots of docs, lots of tutorials, videos, all kinds of things to help get you started. So I mentioned it's arguably the #1 Python CMS at this point. It's free and open source. It's very much built on Django. So if you know how to do Django, you already know how to do Wagtail. It's just like an extension of Django, essentially. It has a very strong focus on accessibility, and this is something that Wagtail project has invested in a lot over the past few years. So when we say accessibility, we're talking about people who actually have to work at your organization, who have to enter content. They have a very accessible web interface for doing that. You know, keyboard navigation, alt text, all that kind of stuff that comes along with accessibility. And Wagtail is also renowned for being very developer friendly. That's what attracted me to it, because I was always a Django guy, and we were evaluating content management systems back in 2016 because we were getting really tired of using WordPress. So eventually, you know, we liked Django and we found Wagtail, and we tried a bunch of different systems, and Wagtail was like, wow, this just feels like I'm doing Django. It's really developer friendly, it's really easy, and I'm going to show you some of that at the end as well. So it's also easier to say what is Wagtail if I just kind of show you. So this is sort of a screenshot of a UI, and you can see there's like kind of a navigation bar here. There is a block with some text in it, and this is like a really nice user interface that this is what the non-technical person would be able to do to update the website. On the note of it being developer friendly, if we just kind of peek behind what's behind this UI, you are not building a user interface. Wagtail does that for you. It's kind of like the Django admin, if you're familiar with that, but way nicer. So here I have a page, I've got a couple fields, and peek behind into the Python code, and you can see I've got the first 4 lines of code there. I've got a class, I've got 3 fields that are a char, a date, and a stream field is like a fancier thing that's in Wagtail. And Wagtail, in turn, generates a UI for this, where it makes it really easy for you to enter that. So for this reason, developers love Wagtail. Editors love Wagtail because it looks really nice and it's easy for them to edit. I've mentioned it's kind of the #1 or like the fastest growing or the most followed, or lots of different hype here I'm giving it. So let me just show you some numbers. This is PyPI downloads. Wagtail officially came out in 2014. It was like the 0-point-something release. So we are celebrating 10 years of Wagtail this year. But really 2016 is when we have metrics available on PyPI. And you can see that it's just like really taken off big time. I mean, these are millions of installs each year that we're looking at. So 2024 is kind of projected based on the first 6 months. But yeah, it's just really taking off. And it's so exciting to see all of these people using Wagtail. So it's so fast growing, right? Who's actually using it? These are some of the flagship sites that these people who work on these sites are actually contributing to Wagtail. They're contributing back to the open source project, which is great. NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, so that whole website, they've got blogs, they've got a lot of photos whenever they do the space missions and stuff. That's all Wagtail. The Motley Fool, investing website, a really massive website in terms of just the amount of articles and content. They're built entirely on Wagtail. Motley Fool has actually given financial support back to the open source project to build features. So a lot of the nice features in Wagtail have been sponsored by Motley Fool. So it's just great to have this community, the commercial and the open source and the developers, and everyone's just working together. Over in Europe, Wagtail started in the UK, so the National Health Service there, which is essentially their socialized health care for the whole country. The NHS website is all built on Wagtail, and there's a lot of other British sites like the Royal College of Art and stuff that are using it as well. And over here in the US, we have Google Blogs. Google has chosen Wagtail for their blogs, so all of the Google blogs are also built on Wagtail, and Google has also given some financial support to Wagtail, and Google has also done their Summer of Code. Wagtail has been a part of the Google Summer of Code, so Google basically gives interns, a couple interns every year to work and pays them to work on Wagtail. So it's just a fantastic project and a lot of people using it. And just in my own experience, because Code Red, we're based in Cleveland here, we do a lot of consulting and things like that. A lot of universities it's been spreading. So MIT, Wharton, Caltech, Syracuse, a lot of universities have been adopting Wagtail because it's open source. There's no cost to it. It's great, but there are also vendors who can help you with it. So it's just a great situation. The open source project. So how does this actually work? I love taking a peek behind the curtain, right? Because in open source, sometimes there's a big company, Microsoft or Google or Facebook, that's just kind of, they're funding, they're paying the bills, they're funding the developers, and then they're giving you an open source product. In this case, that is not how Wagtail works. Wagtail is, everybody is a volunteer who works on it. Pretty much most of the contributors do this as their day job, so they're working on Wagtail, and they spend a little bit of time. Eventually, something they build, they might get it back into Wagtail core, or they help review pull requests. Some of us work at agencies, so at least 5 or 6 kind of agencies that do Wagtail consulting and Wagtail projects, and they're, of course, some of the heaviest contributors. But that's really how it works. There's 21 core team members. I am on the core team, so that's why I'm always cheerleading Wagtail. But it's so open to new contributors and so welcoming of a project that this year we actually have 752 people who have contributed to Wagtail. And it's just such a great milestone. I mean, a few years ago we crossed 500 contributors, and that was like such an exciting milestone. Now we're over 750 contributors, so I really look forward to getting where we cross 1,000 contributors of new people, newcomers. So, and yes, this is our 10-year anniversary. And then the last thing I'll mention, because it's an open source project and because it has been growing so much, we have had some growing pains, right? It used to be that you could just release whenever you wanted, you could put whatever features you wanted into it, 3 or 4 people might agree on those features, and that was that. But now we've had to adopt a more strict semantic versioning because so many sites are using it that if you just ship something and it's a 2. Whatever release and it breaks everybody's release, and the upgrades become a huge pain. So we've adopted a much more strict, a much more stable versioning policy, and we actually have a roadmap that we follow. So new features and things like that people are waiting on, you can actually see on the public roadmap when those are going to be added. And some of these features are sponsored. Like I mentioned, Motley Fool sponsors a lot, Google sponsors some. So a lot of them people are just doing, on their own time. So that's a little bit about Wagtail. Those are some of the reasons why you should be using it. I have a Wagtail tutorial here. I'm not going to do the tutorial now because of the time. But if you're interested in learning Wagtail, there's a lot of tutorials, but this is mine that I've given it at a few other places, so feel free to take a picture of this if you are interested in that. It's on my GitHub. And I also have a Wagtail demo, and I'm going to be doing the demo next here. And I contribute to a lot of Wagtail packages. One of them is called Wagtail CRX. And that is essentially just extensions, more functionality built into Wagtail. So for the sake of the demo, I'm going to show you that so you can see what Wagtail is truly capable of. So, okay, let's switch gears now and do a little bit of a demo. Let me make all of this, let me just figure out what's going on with my slides here. Okay, you can see that. Let me make everything way bigger here. I'm not going to get too deep into the code or anything, but we'll just do a little bit of coding. So I've created a little project here called PyOhio, and this is basically just a boilerplate. When you pip install Wagtail, you do Wagtail start, it spits out a boilerplate. So it's basically a boilerplate, but there's just a few things. If you have ever worked with Django, you'll see this manage.py. That's familiar. Once again, Wagtail is just Django, so everything here follows the Django conventions. So I'm just going to fire up this site. First I have to do migrate. This is also a Django thing. So if you're not familiar with Django, Django has what's called an ORM, object relation model, and basically you don't have to write SQL. Django, you can create little Python classes, and Django automatically translates those Python classes into MySQL or a Postgres or a SQL-like database. So that's what's happening right now is Django is actually generating all of that SQL and setting up the database. So that's a really huge benefit of Django, honestly. It lets you go really fast because you don't have to deal with any kind of database stuff whatsoever. I have to create a user, super user. This is just going to let me log in for the first time. I'm just going to create some dumb... yep, admin is the worst user password combination ever. And then Django comes with a little development server. You really use this in production, but when you're developing, it's nice to just be able to do that on the command line. So, okay, let's fire up the web browser here and go to our local host. So you don't really see anything here. Let me zoom this browser. You don't really see much here, but let's look at actual Wagtail. So Wagtail gives you an admin interface at /admin, and I called my site PyOhio and I created it, my project. So I'm going to use that username and password that I just created a minute ago to log in. Okay, so I'm signed into Wagtail. This is what Wagtail looks like. I actually am on dark mode, so it is Wagtail has a dark mode now. Let me turn that off temporarily so that you can see it in all of its eye-blinding light mode glory. Should have done this ahead of time. Okay, so light mode, you see a lot more purple going on. So this is the little bird. Really, there's just a few areas in Wagtail. There's pages. This is where most of your content lives. And pages it's structured like a folder structure on your computer. You can have the home page. Below that, you might have like a blog landing page. And then below that, you might have all of your blog posts. So I just want to go ahead and show you what that looks like. So we have our home page here. Let's start by creating a child page, and we're going to do, these are some pages that I've created. Actually, the CRX extension I'm using has already pre-created them for me. So you could see right away we have this really nice visual editing interface. Let's just call it blog. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and publish that page. And there's not really anything on that, but what I'm going to do is now kind of drilling down into that folder structure, I'm going to create a blog post. Blog post. And you can see that it's actually starting to generate a preview of what the site looks like as I fill in this information. So I'm going to upload Wagtail has features for managing images, and I'm going to upload. This is actually a picture of Cleveland that it's a huge mural that's in our office that is in just down the road here, and I just think it's the coolest mural that the building put in. So welcome to PyOhio, and I'm just going to set some fields, and all of these fields here correspond to you know, just things that are just fields on a Python class, you know, attributes of a Python class. This is like one of the cooler things of Wagtail. This is called the stream field, and the stream field lets you create all kind of blocks, and you can think of it in your head. It's like JSON almost on the back end, but you can create, you know, rich text. You can, you know, kind of mix and match other things. I could add images. I could add a button, and these are things that the CRX package has pre-created for you, but of course you could create your own with Wagtail if you wanted to. Button. Okay, and I think that's good. And you can kind of see in our preview, we got our text, we got our button. So let's go ahead and publish that page. And that's how easy it was to create a web page in Wagtail. And now if I view it on my local site here, you can see I've got a blog post. I've got that information. I've got my image that I filled in. I've got my text, I've got my button. So, you know, it's a really great way to build a website. Now, let me show you a little bit what the code looks like. I'm not quite sure if we have enough time, but I'll just do, this is the last thing I'm going to show you, some of the code here.
9 more minutes.
Oh, okay, we got plenty of time. So, all right, let me just open up my editor here, and I'll zoom this way in as well. Okay, so I mentioned that I had some stuff pre-created, like the blog page and all that stuff. So here I have a page that I'd like to show you, already commented out and ready to go. So let's uncomment that. And this is how easy it is to create a page in Wagtail. So I've got a couple imports. I'm going to create a class here, and I'm going to call it product page. Let's say we want to get into e-commerce and we want to list some products on our website. Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple fields. So here I have an image. This is a foreign key to a Wagtail image model class. I have a price. This is going to be a decimal field, so like $4.99 or whatever. I have an intro, which is just going to be a char. And then I have something a little bit special here, the body. This, I'm going to use rich text. So rich text, you can kind of think of it like Microsoft Word or like a Google Doc, where you can bold things, you can use headings, you can use bullet points. So Wagtail has that out of the box. You can pull that in and create a field that's rich text. The only really special thing I need to do for Wagtail is just tell it to show the user those fields. So if I had a field that I didn't want the user to edit, I could hide that here so that the editors, maybe we have like a SKU and we don't want the editors to edit the SKU of the product, so we can just hide that from here. And then lastly, I need to create an HTML template for it. So I'm going to create an HTML template. I'm just going to call it product.html. And here's how developer friendly it is. So we got a product model with a couple fields on it. I'm going to open up product.html, zoom that way in, and here I'm using Bootstrap, CSS, HTML, so you see a couple class names, container row, etc. But basically, this is a Django template, so I can do things like, page.intro, page.price. These were some of the fields that I added on my model. So it's really just that easy to create a simple Python class, create a simple HTML file, and I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay. So let me make sure I save my model, and I do have to, because we're using Django's doing the database for us, I do have to run what's called make migrations. And this is going to essentially generate all of that SQL that I needed. And you could see that Django just said, oh, I see that you just created a product page. So it's aware of that now. And I need to then run migrate. And this is also Django saying, apply that new product page into the database. So you can see it applied it, and it ran successfully. So now I'm going to run server and fire up my web server again. Okay. Now Wagtail still looks the same. We haven't really changed anything. But now when I go to create a child page, there's a new entry in this list, and that entry is called product page. And that's the one that I just made. So you'll see that those fields that I created, Wagtail always has a title, so let's just call it widget. I'm going to sell the most generic product there is. Price, let's do $4.99. Intro, best widget you've ever seen. And it's going to ask me for an image, so I'm going to add an image. And I found this wonderful picture of a widget that just coincidentally kind of looks like a pair of brass knuckles, and that really amused me. So now that I filled in those required fields, Wagtail is generating a preview of my product page, and those are those fields that I just created on that Python class. And then this is that rich text field I was talking about. So Wagtail does have some little fancy things you can do in rich text. You can, do a bullet point. You can add in images or documents or embed, YouTube videos or something like that in here as well. So, And you can, also bold things or italic. It's a pretty basic rich text type of experience. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that page. And that was the page I just made. Let's go ahead and look at it live on the site. And there we go. So I forgot to put the title on here. That's probably something we want to do, since it is actually a product page. And we do actually want to sell products. So let's just add the title right up here at the top of the page. Let's do h1 page.title. Doesn't get any more developer friendly than that. Gonna save that. And now when I refresh my page, I got the title up there. So this is the reason Wagtail has become, so popular. Is it's just so easy for developers to use, and it's so easy for content developers to use. So yeah, that's my talk. I'm happy to do questions and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you for coming, and thank you for your interest in Wagtail. All right. Any questions? No? Okay, well, I will be available. Oh, yeah, one question. Mm-hmm.
When it comes to semantic versioning, how closely do you have to follow what's Django?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, when it comes to semantic versioning, how closely does Wagtail follow Django? We do follow it pretty closely. So each Wagtail release basically supports a range of Django releases, and that is all part of the package. So if you try to install the wrong version of Django, when you do the pip install, it will yell at you and say this is incompatible. But we usually support the all of the supported Django releases, that are, I think now is like 4.2 and 5. I think we support both of those because those are the two currently still supported. So we do follow that. And with Wagtail being a semantic versioning now as well, most Wagtail packages are encouraged to stick to the major version. So right now Wagtail is on 6. So pretty much everything will support 6.0, 6.1, 6.2. You can pretty reliably stick to the major version of Wagtail now. So ever since Wagtail 3, we started doing that, and it's been like a lot easier for developers to do upgrades and stuff. Yeah, great question. Any others? No? Okay, well, I will be out in the hallway. Feel free to track me down. Oh, yeah, another? Go for it. Yeah.
Do you support plugins or, I guess, plugins?
Yeah, great question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is, do we support plugins? And especially if you're coming from WordPress, you know all about plugins, the good and the bad. So Wagtail, because it's just a Python package, you can create any other Python package and import it. So there's not like an official plugin system. There's nothing dynamic. Like the user is not going to go here and click and install a plugin, because that would dynamically load code, and that's really where the problem with the WordPress plugins come in. So we don't have anything like that, but there's lots of Wagtail extensions. So I am the author of two. One's called Wagtail SEO, that provides all the Open Graph metadata. Another's called Wagtail Cache, that does a local caching of the site. So yeah, there's plugins. You can just pip install them like you would do anything else, put them in your requirements.txt, and then when you want to use that in your code, you can import it in Python and do whatever you need to do with it. So yeah, it's like more of a developer type plugins. Mm-hmm. Okay, any others? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.